Who's excited for new games in 2020? This guy. Yeah, that's right. It's good, honestly. It's about time. 2019 was kind of a weird year for games for me. Kind of fell off the bandwagon a bit. Took a bit of a break. Wasn't that interested in video games for quite some time. You know what? You don't give a shit about any of that. You clicked on this video because it said new games in 2020. So let's talk about new games in 2020. So kicking things off here, we've got Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now this is for the PC version of the game. Console version came out last year, but yeah, this is the major expansion for Monster Hunter World that continues the story from the end of the main game. It adds the new area Hoarfrost Reach, which is a region covered in snow and ice and filled with its own unique ecosystem and wildlife. There's massive new monsters as well as some cold adapted variants of original monsters. It adds new moves and mechanics for every weapon, along with the new Clutch Claw. I know that this is already out technically, but as a PC primary player, I'm excited for this, so it's on my list. Next up, we've got Final Fantasy VII, the remake, that will be rebuilding and expanding on the legendary RPG. It's a retelling of the story with all of its unforgettable characters and the epic battles that we remember, and it is the first entry in a multi-part saga. The Final Fantasy VII remake is going to take place over multiple games. This is just the initial entry, and this one will be taking place in the sprawling city of Midgar. I am ashamed to admit that I did not play Final Fantasy VII growing up. I think the remake would be a perfect opportunity. We're seeing a lot of actually remakes, reimaginings, remasters of some old classic games. Next up, Ori and the Will of Wisps. This action platformer and sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest has us embarking on an all-new adventure with new weapons, spells, and attacks. They're adding a new shard system to power up Ori's abilities and customize our playstyle. It's going to feature larger-than-life bosses and a new cast of characters, and they're also going to be adding speedrun challenges and horde mode spirit shrines as well as leaderboards, kind of playing into some of the competitive nature of this and the speedrun community, which I think is pretty cool because this is one of those games that community has seemed to pick up. Moving on, Nioh 2, a Souls-like action RPG set in feudal Japan. This is, of course, the sequel to Nioh, which came out not too long ago. We'll be playing as a half-human, half-supernatural yokai warrior and exploring Sengoku-era Japan and a dark realm plagued with demons. They're doing a revamp to the combat system, and you're also going to be getting the ability to transform into full yokai. No idea what exactly that means, but there's, you know, some action combat and some supernatural elements to this game as well. Yeah, I remember the first Nioh getting like a decent reception. It seemed like for people who liked Souls games, this was a nice variant of one of those. Moving on, Doom Eternal, a fast-paced, visceral first-person shooter, and of course the follow-up to the 2016 reboot of the Doom franchise. This one will feature new and classic demons, a huge arsenal of weapons, and some never-before-seen worlds. It's going to have a single-player campaign as well as multiplayer modes. Doom was heralded as just an amazing reboot of the franchise, the 2016 version. I played it and absolutely loved it as well, so I'm pretty excited to check out this new one. Next up, we have got Bleeding Edge, a 4vs4 arena team brawler that fuses combo mechanics with third-person action. It's got a fairly large roster of unique characters with their specific abilities and backstories. There will be custom loadouts so that you can tailor your character to your very own personal playstyle, and you're going to be able to team up with people to execute powerful synergized attacks, and we'll be fighting in arenas, and those arenas also play a role as they are filled with various hazards that will have an impact on how the match plays out. I'm not really sure what to think about this game. Whenever I see gameplay of it, I'm just kind of like, I don't know, but they're saying some pretty cool stuff, so I will be keeping an eye on Bleeding Edge. Moving on, we have got HalfLife Alyx, Valve's return to the Half-Life series, and to many fans' chagrin, not Half-Life 3, and also a VR exclusive experience. This one will be set between the events of Half-Life and Half-Life 2, and we'll be playing as Alex Vance in a fight to save humanity from a vicious alien race. The game was built from the ground up with VR in mind, with deep environmental interactions, puzzle solving, exploration, and visceral combat. They're saying you can do things like aim around broken walls, rummage through shelves, manipulate tools, and toss objects. VR isn't going to be for everybody, and I still think it probably has a long way to go till it reaches mass appeal. And I know a lot of people are pissed off that this isn't Half-Life 3 and it's a Half-Life VR game. You know, Valve traditionally, though, with the Half-Life franchise, has been all about trying to push tech with all the physics stuff they did with the original games. Now they're trying to do this in the VR space. So it is a shame for people who love Half-Life Half-Life but don't want to get into VR, but people who do have VR headsets or willing to pick them up for the sake of checking this out, it's probably a surefire bet, right? Like, this is probably going to be a good game. Next up, we've got Resident Evil 3. We'll be returning to Raccoon City as Jill Valentine with our old friend, the Nemesis. It will feature a single-player campaign as well as the Resistance 1 vs 4 online multiplayer. And again, this is a reimagining of the game with updated graphics and gameplay. Resident Evil 2 was super successful. People absolutely adored it, so it's pretty cool that they're going to be doing this for Resident Evil 3 as well. Like I said earlier, we're getting a lot of these remakes, remasters, reimagining of older titles, and I think ultimately it is a good thing. People get a little pissy about, you know, re-releasing old games, but this is so much more than just like an HD overhaul, you know? Moving on, Cyberpunk 2077, probably one of the most anticipated games of 2020, an open world action adventure RPG from CD Projekt Red. We'll be playing as V, a mercenary outlaw searching for the key to immortality. They're going to offer a rich RPG experience with customization, open world exploration. There'll be a variety of weapons and combat options, body modifications, multiple ways to complete different objectives, a deep story with dialogue trees, choices that actually impact your story. This game is going to have everything if you ask a lot of its fans. I am looking forward to it too, frankly, although I have kind of fallen off of single player story driven games. Really haven't been my jam in recent years. I've just really been more interested in MMOs and multiplayer games and shooters, but I do want to check it out. Like, it looks really good. Looking at any of the gameplay, it looks absolutely phenomenal. I'm confident that they can deliver on this thing. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. Next up, we've got Predator Hunting Grounds, an asymmetrical multiplayer shooter with 4-person fire teams facing off versus the Predator. It's going to be set in the world of the original Predator movie in these lush jungles, and there will be fire teams of players attempting to complete objectives before another player who's playing as the Predator is able to hunt them down. Immediately, this reminds me of something like Dead by Daylight. You got a team, you got to try to escape the area before the enemy gets you, and that's really what they're doing here. And I think the Predator universe is a great setting for this. The only thing that a bit of a bummer for this is it's actually a PS4 exclusive. Speaking of PS4 exclusives, we've got The Last of Us 2, an action-adventure game from Naughty Dog and sequel to 2013's The Last of Us, and this one will be continuing the story of Ellie and Joel in this zombie-infested post-apocalyptic world. They've overhauled the engine with new combat mechanics, new analog stealth systems, and revamped animations. The environments are going to be broader, more complex, and more detailed, and human enemies are much more threatening and capable with sophisticated communication and environmental awareness, creating for some intense and more dynamic encounters. And again, this is another PS4 exclusive. PlayStation just freaking nails it with these exclusives. I'm absolutely going to have to check this thing out because, you know, I just freaking loved the first Last of Us. This one is pretty much a no-brainer. Another no-brainer for me, just because of my affinity for these style of games, is New World, a new upcoming MMO from Amazon Game Studios. It's one of my most anticipated games of 2020, hands down, and it's going to be an open-world MMO with player-run settlements, guilds, action combat, and classless character progression. Originally, this game was kind of more of a sandbox survival open-world PvP game, but that's changed quite a bit. Since the alpha that they had in 2019, they've kind of overhauled the game a bit, focusing on adding more traditional MMO elements, like they've added quest givers, a lot more endgame PvE, there's weapon skill trees, they added a ton of group content, they changed how the player-run settlements work, they took out a bunch of the sandbox construction and now have these pre-constructed places that guilds of players will be fighting for. There's also going to be waves of enemy AI invading player settlements. I love MMOs. I really do adore the traditional MMORPG template. This isn't going to be exactly that, but it's close enough and it looks interesting enough, and I'm really hopeful that Amazon can deliver on this. So those are all of the games in 2020 with confirmed release dates or months. Now the rest of this list is confirmed for 2020, most of them for the holiday time frame, but we just don't have specific dates for these ones. So first on this portion of the list is Minecraft Dungeons, a top-down hack and slash ARPG. Basically, it's Minecraft Diablo. They say it's inspired by classic dungeon crawlers. There's going to be a variety of weapons weapons, abilities, and spells. There will be gear and loot, character levels, an inventory system. We'll be going through dungeons with hordes of enemies, boss fights, puzzles, and obstacles to overcome, and it's gonna feature 4-player co-op. I mean, literally, it's just Diablo with a Minecraft skin. Seems like it could be good. I mean, I'm not particularly pulled into the Minecraft world. I've played Minecraft in the past, but if it's never been a huge game for me, I would check this out. I've got no reservations to going into Minecraft dungeons. It seems interesting enough. Moving on, Dying Light 2, an open world survival horror action game. Now, the original Dying Light had some of the best parkour and world traversal and melee combat that I've ever played. It was just a fantastic game. Now, the Dying Light 2 is going to be taking place 15 years after the original, and they say that the choices you make will have a big impact on your world. For example, there's multiple factions that you can choose from teaming up with, and depending on your choice, it's going to drastically overhaul how the world looks visually, as well as unlocking faction-specific areas of the map. So when you play through Dying Light 2 and you pick a faction, you won't get to see like a big portion of the game that was kind of unique to the other faction. They're also promising to deliver on that same great movement and combat from the original game, with of course some new updated tweaks and improvements. There's also going to be new terrifying threats that come at night. Pretty cool stuff. Also 2 to 4 player co-op in this game. That's another big thing that the first game did pretty well. And I'm looking forward to this because I spent a fairly significant amount of time with the original Dying Light. Next up, Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm probably saying that wrong. This is an open world action adventure game set in 13th century feudal Japan. We'll be playing as a samurai warrior protecting his homeland from invading hordes. We can roam the vast countrysides, discover ancient landmarks, and just explore this island of Tsushima. He is a samurai, but they're saying he's going to deviate from the samurai path in order to overcome the enemies, taking on the role of a ghost. They're saying the game will have deep close quarters combat, range combat, and stealth systems. And this one just looks freaking cool. Really reminds me a lot of Tenchu, a game that I adored growing up as a kid. Cool samurai ninja combat game. That sounds good. Sign me up, dude. Moving on, we've got Godfall. Now, we don't know too much about this game, but it is supposed to be coming holiday 2020. This is a third-person fantasy looter slasher that's focused on melee combat. This is one of those titles that was revealed at the Game Awards, and we know a little bit from the website here. So they're saying there's going to be high-impact combat. It's a third-person game with the focus on melee. They're calling it a looter slasher, and we'll be chasing legendary weapons and armor. And then it's also going to be a co-op game with groups of up to 3 players. And that's basically it. That's really all we know about Godfall, but damn, that first trailer looked pretty good. And we get some sneak peeks at gameplay from their website through some of these animations. Could be cool. It's really toss up, who knows? Another loot game? Hey, I'm all about that, dude. Moving on, we've got Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga. This is the next entry in the critically acclaimed Hellblade franchise. This dark fantasy action adventure game will be continuing the tale of Senua. Probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry, I'm just really bad with words. We got some trailer footage for this at the Game Awards, and apparently it was entirely captured in engine. It looked absolutely gorgeous. It was actually interesting enough for me to download the first game. I still have to get around to playing it, but I heard amazing things about the first Hellblade, so I want to check out Hellblade 2. Next up, Gods and Monsters. This is from the creators of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This will be an adventure game about a forgotten hero on a quest to save Greek gods. We'll be exploring through a fantasy world filled with trials and dungeons while fighting off mythological creatures. It's an open world game that will be mixing traversal, platforming, combat, and puzzle solving. They're saying it's going to have fast-paced combat with a resource management system that will be taking place on the ground and in the air. And they're also saying it's a full-on RPG with character customization, stats and skills, gear that gives special abilities. And this was originally planned to come out in February, but it was then delayed to be later in 2020. This, once more, might be another game that comes with those next generation consoles. I think there's a fair chance. Next up, Watch Dogs Legion, an action adventure game and the third in the Watch Dogs series. This one's set in near future London. Everyone in this world is under constant surveillance. There's private militaries controlling the streets and crime syndicates preying on the vulnerable. It's gonna have a lot of the traditional Ubisoft features, pretty much guarantee that. But one of the big highlights is just the fact that you can literally recruit anybody you see in the city. Every single character will have their own backstory, personality traits, and specializations. You can level them up and customize them for your playstyle. For example, there's kick-ass ex-spy grannies that you can play as. Like with a lot of the Ubisoft games, each of them will have their own unique gimmicks, and they're saying for Legion, it's really just gonna be about just recruit absolutely anybody. So that sounds cool. That sounds all right. Last game on the list now, it is gonna be Halo Infinite. Of course, the next Halo game. We still don't know a lot about this. They have said, though, it's gonna continue the story of Halo 5 Guardians and will be taking the franchise in an unexpected new direction. So what does this mean? Couple theories out there. Some people are saying, hey, maybe this is an open world multiplayer Halo game. Could it be something along the lines of Destiny? I don't know if they're gonna go the route of having Halo become a loot-driven franchise, but I guess it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. We have seen a story trailer, but still no gameplay or further info, honestly, and this will be one of those launch titles for the next generation Xbox. There's a lot of hype around Halo, especially with how well the Master Chief Collection did. A lot of people are looking forward to Halo Infinite. They're talking about taking the game in a new direction. I assume that doesn't just mean traditional Halo, but a new story. We have to assume that means they're going to be opening up kind of the scope of what the game is. It's all kind of just speculation right now, so we'll have to see. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. There's a bunch of stuff in my back catalog, so we're back to gaming. And that also means we're back to making YouTube videos. And I haven't taken one sip of my freaking drink this whole time. It's gonna be cold. Thanks a lot, me, for deciding to record my video before I drank my caffeine. What's wrong with me? Fucking A, let's go. I'm ready to make a video. I'm feeling ready to make a video right now. Which is why I hit the record button, you idiot. You're in your room talking to yourself. Great job.